August 2021, at the tender age of 20, I moved out of home for the very first time. I moved away from the city that I had known and grown up in for pretty much all of my life, Perth, Western Australia, also known as the most isolated city in the world. I moved to the city of my dreams, Melbourne, Victoria, on the complete opposite side of the country. At the time, you might remember, Melbourne was known as the most locked down city in the world, so definitely making an interesting start to a new life. Now, almost 4 years later, I'm 23, turning 24, and I've managed to build a life for myself here in Melbourne. But when I reflect on how it all began, I've realized that hindsight really is the best teacher. So if I could talk to my 20-year-old self, the version of me about to step on that plane, there are 4 main things that I would tell her. This point is definitely the most practical and honestly the baseline. 20-year-old Lara, please save an emergency fund. If not 3 months of living expenses, 1 month at the very minimum. At 20, I was extremely impulsive and sentimental. Even in the months before my move, instead of saving all the money that I was getting from my part-time jobs, which keep in mind wasn't very much, I prioritized making good memories with friends. My mindset at the time was probably something like, life is short, money and material things come and go. Life experiences and memories with these people, they'll last forever, right? And don't get me wrong, I still believe in that to an extent. However, now that I'm older, I can definitely see the cost of chasing short-term experiences and memories without having a financial safety net. Every dinner I was invited to, I just had to go. Every party I had to go. And of course, that would result in spending money inevitably. Every shopping trip, I had to go and buy at least something to mark the occasion. One example is when my friend invited me to the casino, Crown Casino in Perth, a very well-known one, about 1 week before my actual flight to Melbourne. I had a very fun evening and only spent about $100 in total. Now, that doesn't sound like much, especially in the context of a casino. However, this meant when I actually flew to Melbourne 1 week later, I arrived with less than 400 Australian dollars in my bank account. This is with no part-time job lined up, just purely relying on the goodwill of my parents. That same $100 that I could have spent could have gone towards bedding, household basics, even a full week's grocery shop after I'd arrived in Melbourne. Instead, because I was constantly impulsively spending, I had to start my new life purely relying on the bank of mum and dad. Let your parents help if they offer to, and be open and grateful for that. This one's quite emotional for me because it's tied to my own pride. At 20, I was very much in my I don't want to rely on anyone, especially not my parents' stage. There were quite a few reasons for that. The main one is that our relationship definitely wasn't in the best place at the time due to issues with both sides. And I couldn't wait until there was physical distance between us. So when I had to accept their financial help due to my own situation, I couldn't get a part-time job due to very strict lockdowns. I had 0 savings. Doing so felt very shameful to me. Even when they would just send just a little bit of money to help with my groceries and rent, it really, really hurt my pride. I kept on repeating over and over again to myself, a bit like a toxic mantra. Don't worry, Lara. One day you'll be able to support yourself fully financially and you can finally cut off these people who have really hurt you in the past. However, now that I'm older and I feel like my prefrontal cortex has finally started to develop, I feel very, very grateful that they were even willing to help in the first place. If I look at it from their angle, their somewhat crazy, pretty naive 20-year-old daughter is moving across to the other side of the country with 0 savings. In fact, my relationship with my parents began to heal when I accepted their love language. Their way of expressing their love for me as a daughter was to help and support me financially. So if your parents offer to help you financially with little to no expectations, I would say just let them and be grateful when they do. Let them drive you to the airport. Let them take lots of photos when you're there, even though it can seem a bit embarrassing. Let them help you with your groceries and your rent. It doesn't make you less independent if you accept your parents' help. It actually gives you more breathing room to grow and just a little less stress. There's a quote that I love. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. Our lives are built on stories, who we think we are, our goals, our relationships, and what we believe is important at the time. And these are all stories that we tell ourselves. However, it's important to remember that at any moment, all of that can change. I moved to Melbourne for two main reasons. Number one, to transfer universities. And number two, arguably the most important to me at the time, because the people I cared about most were already here, specifically my boyfriend at the time and my closest friend from high school. And before moving, I had this big fancy movie montage in my head of what my new life would look like. You know, a grand reunion with my long distance boyfriend, freedom, independence, partying, etc., etc. And then bam, 1 week after I arrived, Melbourne entered into one of its most strictest lockdowns ever. I couldn't even go more than 5 kilometers away from my share house. It became a season of solitude and self-introspection, and my social circle was reduced to essentially just my housemates. Not long after that, the boyfriend that I had partially moved to Melbourne for, the one that I had just had this grand reunion with, we broke up. And all of this definitely caused quite the identity crisis. However, I didn't move back to Perth feeling defeated. And I didn't crumble under the weight of things not going to my plan. And honestly, I'm so glad I stayed, because I developed into a new person, completely different to the 20-year-old girl that moved across the country. Travel lightly. Literally, this means don't overpack. If you're moving to a metropolitan area, like I did moving to a city like Melbourne, just know you can get anything you need after you arrive. You don't need to bring your entire life with you in one suitcase. You don't need to pay for very expensive extra baggage on your flight over. Metaphorically, I think this ties really closely to my previous point. Don't bring too many obligations from your past life with you. In my case, I had made all of these massive promises to friends back in Perth. I'll visit in 6 months, I'll write letters, I'll come back all the time, and nothing will change. We'll go on road trips. I even had a pen pal at one point, and I promised that I would send the first letter after I arrived in Melbourne. Fast forward to now, almost 4 years later, I haven't even visited Perth once, and I never sent that first letter to my pen pal. And it's not because those friends weren't important to me at the time. They definitely were. It's just that those friendships didn't carry forward into the next chapter of my life. And that is completely okay. I believe that when you move, especially by yourself for the first time, you need to give yourself a lot of space. Space to grow, space to adapt to a totally new environment, space to focus on the new person that you're developing into, and also a space for new connections to grow. So if you're thinking of moving to a new city, or you're just about to take that leap, I hope that these reflections help you feel a little more prepared, or even just a little more seen. Moving across the country at 20 years old changed me in ways I didn't even realize. And even though it definitely wasn't easy and it looked very messy from the outside at times, it was definitely worth it. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And if you've related to anything that I've said, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.